Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Delara. This episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at Props.cash. Props.cash, the number one player prop betting tool in the market. You got those red charts, the green charts. You have the NBA, the WNBA, MLB, hockey, the NFL when that comes around. Every single sport, you have access to their tools, and you can get that for 25% off your first month with code DELARA25. Desktop, phone, there's an app. It's always at your fingertips, and that's something that you're going to need in your pocket and at your disposal whenever you're betting on player props in these types of markets. And you can get that once again for 25% off your first month of props.cash with code DELARA25. So the NBA Finals just finished game one. We're recording this on Friday and about in the middle of the afternoon, and I had to bring on a guest of the pod, a former guest of the pod. You know him, you see his bets in the Action app, but we've got Steve Keech over here, and it's a pleasure to have you back on the pod, man. How you doing?
It's good to be here, Joey D. I think it's been about a year since my last appearance.
Yeah, last
Good
time
to
we
be
had you on
back.
was for MLB, so this is a little bit of
Yeah,
a pivot here, but I'm excited for the opportunity.
yeah. Very, very different topic, but yeah, it's an honor to be part of this finals crew you got scheduled through the rest of this series here.
Yeah,
It's for
we have some pretty we have some heavy hitters. So obviously, we had Brandon and Jim on for game one. We got Steve for game two. We got Prop Bomb for game three. Matty Chucks is going to come on and help us with game four. And then I'm assuming we're going to have a game five, but the BMAT is coming on for game five. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. But I wanted you on in particular for game two because for those of you that don't know, Steve does a lot of the projections for Rotogrinders, and I don't like I use some of his projections when I'm betting as like a baseline sometimes, or to like cross check myself just based on like what I'm going through. And I find it really interesting to be able to use like that type of modeling data for longer term series, because I think one of the things it does, and Steve, I'm going to pass the torch to you here in a second, but to me, I think it helps keep you like grounded and from overreacting to certain things. And like when we were looking at a lot of these props, a lot of them are the same for a lot of these players from game one to game two. There really hasn't been a change. Like Luka had one assist, he's still at 8.5. Tatum, had 11 boards, still at 9.5 rebounds. What do you think about trying to use modeling to help you in some of these longer term series to kind of stay grounded and to not like overreact to anything?
I think it can be a little bit twofold. I think it can be a gift and a curse sometimes. Like I feel like there's been prior years where I've been more stuck to like what the model says and kind of like making a point not to overreact to things I see. Thinking that maybe it comes back, but yeah, it's tough. Shit, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought.
It's all right. No,
Oh,
so
I
I
do
was
that on the
saying,
spot.
no, I was saying, like with the modeling and stuff like that, and you kind of were getting into like how it can be a gift and a curse because you're looking at it from one way and you're like trying to you're like, well, like my model still says this, but it's like you're watching the game, you're seeing how the defense is maybe attacking something or how they're limiting something. Like, how do you kind of balance the two things? Because like I feel like a lot of times the sports books lines are based on like a model, basically. And it's like, like they are a little bit slower to react sometimes. But like if you have the ability to watch the games and kind of, use both of your tools, maybe you limit somebody's minutes. Like how do you kind of balance those couple things when, you do have such a good model that's been reliable really for the whole season?
Yeah, it's also just a thing of like not, you need to be able to like kind of may have a reason for something. Like I feel like when in the past when I've struggled in the playoffs, it's been like not reacting to certain things that like sometimes I see. Maybe it's different matchup stuff. Like in this particular spot, maybe my model is like kind of has some holes at looking into a situation, like especially on like the extremes, like teams are a lot better or worse than normal.
Yeah.
That can be kind of a tough thing. But the playoffs is just a different animal. Like where this is it. Like like using season long data can obviously be misleading. Like you're getting the best version of these teams. They're doing what they think they need to do to be effective in this particular matchup. So I think
Yeah.
like in the
So
regular season, it can be easier to get by with modeling because like it's just there's a little bit more there's just more variance kind of. But at this point in the year, like this is it. You're getting the best that these teams have. Um, yeah, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
I think.
100%. So, like, one of the plays that we had talked about, and we had consistently been betting, right, was last series we bet Miles Turner under 1.5 blocks every single game. That really should have cashed every single game, aside from that one like phantom block that they gave him credit for in game one, right? Now, in game one of the finals, I had conversations on Cash that about, how I thought Daniel Gafford was going to get played off. Like, I didn't like the matchup for him regardless. You and I had both put in under 1.5 blocks for Gafford as well. Basically, like, as soon as the line popped, it's bad matchup against Boston, given like the way they just don't really allow a lot of blocks generally. Now, Gafford only played 14 minutes in game one, and we've kind of seen it adjust down already now. Like, they moved it to under 0.5 blocks at plus money. With somebody like Gafford, where, you kind of see that already he's getting played essentially like off the court. Like, is that something, because like how do you kind of adjust for like that type of thing, or like what do you think about this type of play for Gafford? Like, do you want to go back on like an under half a block at plus 170, or is that like a little bit more variable because it's, he only needs one?
Yeah, I think it's more variable. I think they've kind of sucked the juice out of that one, unfortunately. I do think he has a shot to play more in game two. Like none of the bigs were effective at all. Like
Nobody
Lively
was good.
wasn't particularly good. I think Gafford, like the one thing that he does give them, which can be helpful, is like he's a good finisher around the rim.
Yeah.
Like I feel like with Lively, he gives you something different than Gafford does. But he, like when it comes to finishing around the rim, like if it's not a dunk, I would much prefer to have Gafford out there. Um, we didn't like Maxi Kleber wasn't good either. He was kind of a big net negative. Didn't look bad, but obviously the plus minus wasn't good, and really none of the centers had good results. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Gafford like back in this 20-minute range. Much more than that would be surprising, especially with Kleber starting to, it seems like, kind of get his feet under him now.
Yeah, because
Would expect Lively.
Kleber played 20. He played 20
Yeah,
minutes and he took one shot. Like, him and Lively only took one shot each, which is kind of crazy when you think about just like you're on the floor for 20 minutes in like in like a finals game and you're just not shooting the ball. Um like Gafford was 3 for 3 from the field, and he also made both of his free throws. So he had 8 points on basically perfect shooting. Um some of the way, like I'm a little, I kind of agree with you. Like, I'm a little hesitant to like full fade Gafford. I think that he's getting played off, but at the same time, it's like you said, like nobody else played good. So it's like, do you just want to go back to the guy that you kind of, I guess, like realistically, maybe trust a little bit more?
yeah. I think there's just like a little bit. I was kind of surprised that, obviously just like the lack of spot up looks Dallas got. Not shocking that Boston was able to help prevent them, but like just how good they were at limiting that was surprising. I would have also thought that like there would be more. We kind of saw it a little bit in the very beginning of the game, but I think as it kind of went on, it really wasn't this way. But I would have thought that we'd get more Gafford on, you know, Tatum, smaller defenders are in the post, and they would try to make a point to take advantage of that because he is very good at finishing over smaller guys. But yeah, they're just kind of in a math problem right now. We saw it really play out in game one. But if
Yeah.
Dallas doesn't find a way to get more threes up, they're in big trouble. So I think that needs to be their
The
focus
primary
really
focus.
going.
Yeah, because like let's talk about that a little bit, because Boston took 48% of their shots from 3-point range compared to Dallas took 29%, and Boston shot 41% from three compared to 24% from Dallas. And it's a significant difference too. Like, Boston took 39 threes, Dallas took 25. That Boston made 10 more threes. That's a 30-point swing just on the threes right there. And, one of the things that Dallas has been excellent at throughout the course of the playoffs has been the corner three. And Dallas didn't make any. They only got two, or like, I think like one of them was like, depending on which, modeling or like which company you're looking at is giving them credit for one corner three versus like other ones, right? I think cleaning the glass might not be including it, maybe because of garbage time. But either way, Dallas made, say, one corner three. That's like untenable for them. But at the same time, I don't even know if I'm that surprised. I'm a little surprised just based on the volume, right? But at the same time, Boston really, really does a good job of limiting those looks. Is that something that you think, like I think it's one thing for us to say, like, you need to take more threes. But at the same time, like, how do you go about getting them? And like when we looked at this, one of the ways they generate a lot of those threes is Luka Doncic, driving into the paint, getting dribble penetration, kicking to the perimeter. Luka had one assist on six potentials. So, like, what do you think about Dallas being able to generate a little bit more looks from 3-point range?
They need to find some way. The one thing that did surprise me a lot is like we saw. So we kind of talked a little bit about this. Derrick Jones Jr. hits the first three of the game. He even gives you like the Jalen Brunson celebration after he hits it. I'm like, this guy's confident. Like, there's no way he doesn't, get up some more looks. He shot one more three the rest of the game, and he missed it. So he's got to be somebody that I think is useful. Obviously, like him, you kind of want him shooting in the corner. But I think it's going to have to come on the backs of Luka and Kyrie if Boston's going to continue to make it tough on them as passers and giving, PJ Washington open corner threes. They're going to have to try to generate some looks basically in pull-up. It's going to have to be a little bit different than we saw from them in the last couple of series. Like PJ Washington was basically shooting out of his mind in those last two Western Conference series. And getting that level of production from him was unbelievably helpful for them. So if they're not really getting anything from anybody else, it's going to have to come from pull-up stuff. Boston really doesn't – they're not like a sieve in any one direction, but I think if Dallas really, wants to make a point to get up more looks, they should probably try to do it via pull-up and probably try to do it early-ish in the shot clock.
Yeah, so because Kyrie was 0 for 5, PJ Washington 0 for 3, and then Luka was 4 for 12. But aside from that, like Hardy took 3 threes, but I'm not, Hardy, he puts up numbers but it's a lot of it's really just in garbage time. So they really weren't getting a lot of 3-pointers taken from anybody. Like I think I'm stunned by the fact that Kleba didn't take a single 3. Like that's why you would think that he would be on the floor. I guess he's a little bit more flexible defensively, in terms of being able to guard a little bit further out. But still, I mean, it's brutal watching them play like kind of with that process. And like on the flip side, Boston, pretty much everybody took and made a 3. The only like Pritchard was 0 for 4 because he just couldn't, make a shot at all. But other than that, every single player on the Celtics made at least 2 threes. And that makes the math problem, I think, a lot more difficult, like kind of like you were saying. So when you're, like we talk about this and like, I think this is one of the things with like the modeling that I think is interesting, right? Because we talk about adjustments and we're like, I think we need to see more of like X, Y, and Z, right? Just based on like what we're witnessing, what we're watching. When you're doing this, like for Derrick Jones Jr., for example, like, are you like, when you're trying to construct this and you're saying like, well, I think they need a little bit more from him. Is there like a way that you can kind of manually do it? Or is it just like you're looking at it and you're like, well, my model's saying that like it should be like about here. But I'm capping it in this way based on what I'm looking at on the court and kind of using them both to support each other.
Yeah, I mean, I could, manually kind of bump people. And there's times where I'll do it. I don't think this spot would be one with Derrick Jones. I'll kind of just, at least where I'm at right now with game 2 numbers, it's still somewhat in the early going. But I haven't really adjusted much of what I expect to come into game 1.
That's
so
fair
from
enough.
a volume perspective, I think, I definitely was surprised that Jones only got up 2 3-point attempts. That's kind of we may get to this soon, but that's kind of the one area I'm looking for more from him. But yeah, not really like projecting a huge uptick for him, but they kind of need him to stay on the floor defensively. They don't like have any really good playable wing depth on the bench. I was kind of surprised that they even went to Tim Hardaway Jr. I was wondering if they were going to do that. I was wondering in the first half, like when it got ugly, maybe we'll see him. He looked terrible and
He was
like just
bad.
did not look like he was even like remotely ready to play.
Yeah, like, and like I'm a little surprised too because like I know that Exum is like kind of like a negative offense. Like he's just not like a very good like offensive player. But at the same time, like his defense is there. He can stretch the floor. He can shoot some threes. I was a little surprised to only see 2 minutes from him. I know he's not like the biggest dude, but at the same time, you figure maybe he could have been used as like an option on one of the Boston wings. He's 6'6", so he's not small. But I know that he, maybe it's a little bit of a matchup issue. Now, one of the things that I always try to look at in these games, and like I know it's like a little bit of a small sample size, right? Just coming into one game, but you can obviously tell that they're a little bit wonky, right? With potential assists and rebound chances. Looking at the potential assists, I was a little bit surprised by a couple of things. Number one, Derek White had 5 assists on 2 potentials, so that's just like that's a little weird. I'm
I need to
assuming
go
that.
back and watch those White assists. Yeah, I'm very
Yeah,
curious. I wish I would have done that, but yeah, I'll need to do that for sure.
I need to see what those are. I'm off the cuff. I'm assuming that a lot of them are like they were to Porzingis or something in like a little bit of like a high post or something like that, and Porzingis makes the shot. So they're just like, well, it's home scorekeepers. Like we're gonna give you the assist. So I'm wondering if a little bit of it is that. But I think one of the more notable things, at least with the potentials, was Tatum led in potential assists. He had 5 assists on 14 potentials. So I thought that was notable. Luka only had 1 assist on 7 potentials. But the guy that really surprised me was Al Horford had 3 assists on 12 potential assists in what did he play? 20 in about 30 minutes, which I think was on the high end of what we were thinking Horford could even play. Is there anything that you take away from Horford not only starting but playing 30 minutes in this game? And he had 3 assists on 12 potentials, and he also had 6 rebounds on 12 rebound chances. So he really was kind of stuffing the stat sheet in like a surprising way. I think just we knew Porzingis was going to play, but Horford seemed to get pretty extended run here.
How many raw passes did Horford make?
Horford
35
made
or something.
35 passes, which is 5th most in the game.
Yeah, a pretty
So
crazy pass to potential assist rate there.
it
I
is,
think
yeah.
that'll fall back down for sure. I imagine he like swinging to other 3-point shooters was probably a big part of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's got a little bit of value as a passer. I feel like at the top of the key, kind of as a little bit of a hub sort of guy. Like I feel like we've seen him have some success as a passer in that sort of role. And he's just, he's a good, solid all around player. Like he generally makes the right play when it's in front of him. So I think his assist probably was 1.5 with some.
It was low, yeah. Because I'm looking at him today, like for this game, because his points props at 8.5. I feel like he's just not going to be looked at to score necessarily like in the same way, right? And they bumped it up from 6.5 to 8.5 here. Rebounds props at 6.5. Assists they bumped up to 2.5 now. It's plus 160, and you can get RA is 8.5 at minus 102. So like he was somebody that I wanted to bet. Like I was coming into this, I was like thinking like I was like maybe like this is a way to bet him. But it feels like it does feel a little bit inflated given the fact that he played 30 minutes. I think with Porzingis, he came off the bench for I had to check, second time in his career that he's ever come off the bench. So that was, that almost like screwed up our first quarter bets. But besides that, right? Horford, I thought it was interesting that he played simultaneously to Porzingis for a couple minutes throughout the course of the game. And I also think that because it was a blowout, they were just like, well, Porzingis doesn't have a minutes limit, but like if we're blowing them out, he's first guy off, and the hook is gonna be like fast for that because it's just like we don't need him, we don't need him to be out there. We'll let Horford take care of business because they're kind of similar in terms of what they bring to the table. What do you think about Horford props? Like, do you think that they're a little bit inflated, given the 30 minutes and the fact that it was a blowout in game one?
So yeah, I think there's fairly wide range of outcomes on him. I think there's a non-zero chance that we do see Porzingis start. I kind of would lean toward them sticking with the same group, just given how well things went,
And
especially
Porzingis
early
came
on.
in so fast. Like he
Yeah,
came
he
in
did.
after like 3 minutes, so it wasn't
Yeah, it was
like
a
the end of the world.
there was 7 minute something on the clock when he checked in. I do remember that. Horford under 8.5 RA.
Oh, it's 7.5. It looks like it's 7.5 at DraftKings now. It kind of is fetching some like different things here.
Yeah, well, that changes things. Then under 8, the thing that scores an odds was pulling in was under 18.5 minus 118, which
Yeah,
where I am would have been a bet for me.
yeah, he's at 8.5 under 8.5 at minus 118. So I think whatever I was looking at was a little stale.
Yeah, so I think that's actually my highest graded rebounds and assists play would be that under.
Yeah,
I'm projecting Horford for 30 minutes again, with Porzingis getting a decent size uptick. We saw, I think, 21 from Porzingis in game one.
21.
I'm at
Yeah,
25
and basically
and a
nothing
half.
in the second half.
Yeah,
He basically didn't play in the second half. So
yeah.
um,
I'm at 25 and a half for the game. I think there's, again, like a decent range of outcomes there. Like, we don't know for sure that he's coming off the bench again. Obviously, if he starts, that number would come up, or number will come down. So I think in that vein, like, it seems like props are basically accounting for the fact that Horford will start again. So I
that's
think
what
if
it seems like.
you're of the
Yeah,
opinion that maybe that doesn't happen, I think there's a better chance we see Horford props be lower come game time than be higher come game time, I think. So that's kind of something to think about if you have
yeah.
any interest in that under 8.5 RA.
Yeah, I like the under 8.5 too, because it's like I came in, like I said, like I wanted to play it, like I wanted to play an over if it was like 6.5, or like with the idea that he's going to move to the bench, but like we still could see the minutes uptick. But it feels like they're capping this in a way where they're like, look, you just had 10. You're going to look at all these potentials and say, like, if you're doing any research, but like I think when you like kind of like what you were saying, if you get under the hood of it a little bit, it's probably a little bit high. And I don't think, because his PRA is at it looks like there's 17 and a halves in the market for PRA. I don't know if I want to add like essentially a 9-point prop for him to that, just because he can make threes. We've seen him get hot, and I feel like RA is a little bit more of like a usage stat, and it's just like if you're on the floor, like the minutes are just going to kind of come, like, if you're playing more minutes, you're going to be able to get and maybe rack some of those up. So are you more comfortable with the RA or the PRA for Horford here?
So I would have the RA graded as a little bit of a better play than PRA. And yeah,
Yeah.
I do think the potentials for Horford is probably the highest figures, maybe in both stats that we'll see, like across this entire series.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely like a little bit high, and when you incorporate the fact that like Porzingis is playing, obviously it's a little bit wonky, but over the course of the season, he's only hitting 8.5. He's only going over 8.5 at a 43% clip, and he's averaging 8.4 when he's playing alongside of Porzingis. So he has gone over it in both games against Dallas with 11 and 10. But at the same time, I think that this is just a little bit inflated given the minutes, because he's at in both games he played 27.7 and 29.8. Both games were blowouts in the regular season and in the playoffs. So I think that I do kind of like this under on the RA.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I don't think we talked about this enough, but Porzingis was fucking awesome in that game. He looked incredible, and he like just giving the Mavericks this matchup problems. Like even seeing them like in the few times where they had like Josh Green matched up with him, it's just like there's just no chance. Josh Green is just like too small for this matchup. Like I feel like he can't really do a whole lot with the wings. He can't do anything on a guy like Porzingis, obviously. Kind of a tough spot. But yeah, KP, like if he is feeling good and he's playing anything, I don't think anybody could have like realistically expected that level of output and as good as he was. But if he's anything even close to that, I would not be surprised to see Horford in the mid to high 20s minutes instead of the 30 that we saw.
So I want to talk about Porzingis a little bit more, because actually one of the things that I noticed was in the game that he got hurt, if you watch the film, he had like that medical tape like on his calf, like on the left calf. Didn't have that in this game. He didn't have it in game one. He wasn't wearing that. So I thought like to me like that was like, oh, like I guess like maybe he is like really feeling good, because like even it's not even on like precautionarily, right? Additionally, like his props are so like wonky right now because like he played 21 minutes. Like I said, I think he really only played 21 because of the way the score was. You said you have Porzingis at 25 minutes ish. What do you think about his props? Because like I like his first quarter points again. I think 11 is unlikely. Obviously, that was a nice cash getting like to 12-1 odds on that, but a lot of the shots, like I don't watching it, like I know Matt Moore mentioned that they put Luka on him a little bit more in the second half, but at the same time in the first half, he's getting these shots. They run a lot of plays for him in the first quarter in particular. And the first quarter is his highest scoring quarter out of any quarter that he plays throughout the course of the season. 3.5 again, I just think is too low given the amount of times they really kind of fed him the ball to start this game off as soon as he came off the bench.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, like, even if he comes off the bench again, if the rotation pattern is similar to game one, like, it probably doesn't really matter that much.
No,
Um,
it just kind of
and
caps the ceiling. Like he can't play
yeah,
12. He can only play
right.
like 7 or 8.
Yeah, I think you would like to have him match up with Gafford. Ideally, would be like if you could choose your matchup, that would be the one you choose rather than Lively, who he was kind of ended up being matched up with. But it didn't really matter. I mean, you saw him take advantage of the smaller players. When Lively was out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a tough spot. I do think the Luka matchup for KP was effective, and Luka was, say what you want about him. The Mavs, shitty game one performance, no two ways about it. But he was very good, I thought, defensively, especially in the second half in that particular matchup.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, Porzingis scored 18 points in the first quarter, in the first half, and only 2 in the second half. Obviously, the minutes were a swing. Um, so like I'm a little bit more reserved in terms of like the upside of like the first quarter market. Like I certainly sprinkled the 7+ and the 10+ just based on the fact that like we can roll over a little bit of our profits from last game, and like we got the same numbers, but I do think that like 2 buckets is just like if he's out there for 7 minutes, 8 minutes, like he's going to get loose for a 3. They design plays for him early in the game, so I like that. But Luka, I think, did look pretty good. I was a little surprised they used him on Porzingis. Like I felt like they should actually try to use him on Tatum a little bit more, because Tatum like doesn't have like the same type of burst, I feel like, as some of these other guys. Like he's not like Jaylen Brown, I feel like he's a little bit more athletic. I feel like he's got a little bit more quickness to him, for example. But Luke is like I think he's a smart defender. I don't think he's a particularly good defender, but when he's engaged, I think that matters, right? So I guess like putting him on KP, who's obviously dealing with some sort of injury recovery, maybe that's the type of move. But when we looked at the defensive coverage of Tatum, for example, I thought it was fascinating because they like the whole defense was like collapsing on Tatum multiple times when he would drive into the paint. I think he handled it really, really well. And I'm a Tatum hater, right? But at the same time, what he did in game one was very instrumental to Boston's success, right? Like he was getting into the paint, drawing in all this defense, and then kicking the ball out. He had a great rebounding game. He had 11 boards on 15 chances, and he had 5 assists on 14 potentials. Is there anything that you want to take away from Tatum's performance in game one? And is there anything that you think is actionable? Because I have something that I think I like.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a good box score for him by any means. Like, I think if you just look at that, you're like, oh, this is, a shitty kind of game one performance. 6 turnovers
Yeah.
is a lot.
6
Obviously, the
turnovers was
scoring wasn't really
crazy.
there.
Yeah.
But I do think if you watched each possession he had, it seemed like he was making the right play a lot of the time. And yeah, wasn't, trying to do too much. Just was taking what was there. When other guys were feeling it, he was, fine, relegating to a distributor. I also think the matchup with like how Dallas defends him is interesting. Like Derek Jones Jr. is a good perimeter defender. He's long, he's quick, he's got a lot of good things to defend on the perimeter. But when you have a guy like Tatum, like kind of backing him down, and like Derek
Yeah.
Jones can't, he's not big enough to defend in the post.
He's
He can't
210.
hang, he can't hold up. Like they basically Tatum's going to be able to get him, toward the rim. Like there's really no resistance that Jones is going to offer, which I think by nature kind of forces a little bit more extra defensive attention once that kind of starts to play out, and Mavericks can see Tatum kind of having his way there, which I think does make this a good spot for him as a passer, just in general. So it wasn't super surprised to see like the high number of potential assists, and I do think that there is some staying power with that if Dallas is okay with trying to help late in possessions on him and dealing with trying to scramble and contest a three or whatever it is.
Yeah, because so these are a couple of the things that I was looking at for Tatum. For me, like I think the rebounding floor just seems to like consistently be high for him. He's averaging double digit rebounds throughout the entire playoffs. He always sees the spike. The rebound chances are there. Porzingis grabbed a couple rebounds, but like he's not really like looked at as like an elite rebounding option in the way Horford is kind of utilized now too. He's not really looked in the same way either. I like Tatum RA is 14.5, and I liked it. I thought that, he's hit this number at like a pretty high clip. He's hit it 42% of the season. But that, obviously includes the regular season. During the playoffs, he's hitting this 80% of the time. He's 12 for 15 on 14.5 RA. And he's, he just had 16 in game one. That was a look that I was looking at because I think it kind of encapsulates both the rebounding floor with like, there is some ceiling to the rebounds, but also I think that like coupling it with the assists, I'm getting a little bit of upside based on like what the potentials were. And honestly, it seemed like a lot of like the Celtics could have shot better on a lot of those Tatum passes where he was, the defense was collapsing in on him and leaving him kind of open on the perimeter.
Yeah, so like this is, I think, a decent example of like what we were kind of talking about earlier with like not overreacting to things or maybe not reacting quickly enough. Like so, I'm pretty much right at 14.5 on Tatum in terms of RA.
Yeah,
but it's hard when you're doing player projections to account for like there's just so many little nuances, so many little details, so many variables that you can make an argument could impact a player's projection. And with Tatum, like, yeah, he there's obviously, there's a lot of different ways for him to get this. Like, I think it's hard to model him being like used kind of on a center who's like not super involved. It's hard to model like him having a matchup where Dallas is more likely to double late or double at all. Like, it can be hard to kind of take those things into account, which is sometimes a problem for me. I feel like with betting playoff props is that I'm not quick enough to like adjust on things like this. So I think this is kind of the other end of like, sometimes it is good just to stay, true to your numbers or whatever. But there are also times where it's like, I may see a 14.5 here and be like, there's nothing to it. And I probably won't bet it, but I do think that like, if you can put something, tangible behind it, kind of like what you're saying, like a real reason for why this is playing out the way it is, that is the difference.
Yeah, because one of the other things that I'm thinking about, right, and this is a little bit of a Tatum and a Luka question, right, because what I love about the playoffs, I love these series player props. I love them. Like, I love the assist leader, I love threes leader, I love all of those. I think that they're a lot of fun, right? Luka had 1 assist, so he's basically like kind of spotting everybody a game almost. Like, and Luka is the best passer in the series, one of the best passers in the league. When you look at the matchup and you look at some of the numbers, right? So like Luka is pre-series, he was like minus 700 to lead an assist, depending on the book. He's still like minus 400 after having 1 assist in game 1. Tatum is second in the odds at BetMGM, and you can actually grab Tatum at plus 750 to lead the series in assists. I think the number is long, given kind of like what I'm seeing, what the potentials are. I know it's early, but do you think that there's anything to that? Like, I know you're not like the biggest like series player prop better, but like, is this something where you think that Luka just regulates back and it's like, we bet this at plus 750 and it's like, dude, why the fuck did you bet that? Or is it like one of those things where you're looking at it and saying like, well, I don't know if this is a great opportunity for Luka, given the fact that I think they just need him to score.
It's hard to say. Like I wasn't really I didn't think this was going to be a huge Luka assist series.
Yeah.
But I think the problem with that is it was like there's Boston things are fairly spread out. Like it wouldn't be surprising for you to see a game where Tatum has 2 assists and Drew Holiday and Derek White or something have like 6 or 7. So it's I think Luka like just if we get Luka-ish production from this point out, he's still likely wins this. I think I definitely wouldn't lay the price on him to win it at this point. I do think Tatum at 750 is interesting for kind of some of the reasons that we said. Still think that it's probably a little bit long, but maybe not too long.
Not long enough.
Yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, I wouldn't go like sprinting to it. I don't think.
No, that's fair enough, because I think I'm going to play it I think I'm going to play it light with the idea, because like I honestly, like if I saw Luka had 1 assist, I would kind of hope that this was an opportunity to buy in on him, but like it's not like you can't you're not going to bet minus 300 when he's spotting other people like 6-7 assists or so to speak. So I think that gets to be a little bit more difficult. And I know that you mentioned that you don't think it's a great Luka assist series. They said his assist line again at 8.5. My inclination was to go under on that right off the bat, just based on the fact that he had 7 potentials. Like he didn't even have over 8.5 potentials. What do you think about that type of play? Do you like to me, they seem to be comfortable letting Luka score, and it was just like, you do whatever you got to do. You're not the most efficient scorer just in general. We're gonna lock down everybody else, and then like you're still not even gonna have a great matchup because Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Derek White, they're all pretty good covers for you on the other side of the floor.
Yeah, I had honestly the exact same thought watching it. Like Boston's, especially with the way that they play, they want to get up threes. That's kind of is their bread and butter. Generally, they shoot them pretty well. If Dallas's offense is Luka, contested twos, Kyrie tough twos, off, against Brown and Holiday, that's a math problem that Boston is going to be happy to have, to make Dallas deal with. Like they're
we just
plenty.
saw them do it. We just saw them do it against Indiana.
Yeah.
Indiana crushed in the paint, and like didn't matter. So and they set like I think it was almost like a record-setting 2-point performance, I think, but it like really didn't matter at all to them.
No, so yeah, I think their focus, like it was in Game 1, it seemed pretty clear that they don't want to let the ancillary characters beat them. They don't want to give PJ Washington open corner threes. They don't want to give wide open dunks to Daniel Gafford. They're trying to make Luka and Kyrie beat them. Do what you want to do. Score 35, 40 points, but if you can't do it super efficiently and you don't get any help from anybody else, still uphill climbing.
100%. So I saw that you logged another Luka bet, and you had like a different Luka angle. Tell me about that. Tell me about that play and a little bit of why you like it.
So this has been sort of a systemic thing for me with Boston. They obviously are a very good defensive team, but they force the fewest opponent turnovers. They did that during the regular season, 12 per game they forced, which was tied for the lowest in the league. They are at 11.7 so far through 15 playoff games.
That's surprising.
So that's kind of has held up. They're obviously, like I said, a very good defensive team, but they're just good at staying in front of you. They don't like kind of overcommit. They don't like overplay, trying to get steals. They're smart, and they don't need to generate a ton of turnovers to have success defensively. So that factor, just on top of the fact that the 4.5 is a fairly high number for turnovers, even if we expect 41, 42 minutes for Luka. I was projecting 3.84 in 41 and a half minutes for Game 2, so that was enough at under 4.5 at minus 130 for me to be interested. It's a little bit too high of a number in this particular matchup.
Yeah, I mean, he's only averaging 3.9 during the playoffs anyway. Like, he's only hit this in 5 out of 18 games. So, regardless of matchup, like, it seems like, based on hit rate, it's a good play. But then when you couple in the matchup data, I tailed it right away. So, I might even add to it a little bit, honestly.
Yeah, the other thing is, Minnesota, they were seventh in the NBA in opponent forced turnovers. They have a lot of guys who can kind of get in passing lanes. And the matchup before, Oklahoma City was first in generating opponent turnovers. So this is like, kind of the exact opposite sort of matchup that he's been in for the last couple series in the West.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Because and even Minnesota had trouble turning him over a little bit. Oklahoma City had some spikes. He had 2-7 turnover games against Oklahoma City and another game at 5. So that definitely makes a little bit more sense. And then even the Clippers, they threw a lot of Terrence Mann at him. Paul George, pretty good on ball defender. And I don't, Jaylen Brown's a good defender. Just in terms of the fact that he's pretty physical, but he's not, like you said, he's not something that's overcommitting. So I like the under 4.5 as well here. When you're looking at this game overall, my inclination for game 2 is I was I want to bet Dallas. Dallas opened at 7.5. They instantly got bet down to 7. Just based on the fact that I think that there are some things that they can improve upon. They still held Boston to 105, 107 points, right? Did you have a lean on this game, one way or the other, just watching it? Because it seemed like Dallas left a lot on a lot of meat on the bone, but at the same time, Boston kind of did too, which makes me a little bit nervous. But Boston, they just they got the game down to an 8-point game after being up by 25. Boston just has these ebbs and flows where, if they run a little bit cold, I think it's going to allow a team like Dallas that can have such good offensive players like Luka and Kyrie, they're going to put up the points. And even if they're a little bit inefficient, if you're running cold, that's a way to kind of keep them close. Is there anything that you think about this game from a side perspective?
So there's nothing I saw in game 1. I came into the series on Boston to win the series in a couple different ways. There's not really much I saw that would make me be oh yeah, I need to bet Dallas in game 2. But what you just said, I think, is the big thing. They they shoot a lot of threes. There's a lot of variance within those shots. That there was some unbelievable shot making that took place, especially in the early parts of that game 1. If those shots aren't falling, and that's kind of another reason why I think with Boston, they're kind of likely to get in blowouts. It's not super surprising when they get in games that are out of hand. What I was thinking about doing, and you really got to take your nuts out, put them on the table, I think, to get down with this. But I would want to play a Dallas -5.5, -6.5, -7.5, alt spread. So don't just take the money line. Try to basically take them to win by some sort of margin, maybe not much, but a couple possessions. Put that in some sort of a same game parlay with Derrick Jones Jr., 2+ threes.
This is pretty savage, honestly. I'm looking to see what kind of number we can get on this right now, because I think I get what you're saying, because it's basically look, I don't know if the upside is necessarily there for Dallas to win by that type of I don't know, for them to just win. It's do I really even want to play that? Or do I want to play them to blow them out, because Boston kind of runs into these ruts. And I do think they kind of, I don't say they wave the white flag too early because of the 3-point variance, but at the same time, it's things can escalate pretty quickly if those shots aren't falling then.
Exactly. That's 100% of the handicap. It's just the shot profile that Boston has can lead itself to blowouts in one direction or the other.
So how about this market then, maybe instead? Because instead of even having Dallas to win, FanDuel has largest lead at any point. So you can bet Boston to lead by 15, 20, and 25. Those are different thresholds. But Dallas to lead by 15 at any point is +350. Dallas lead by 20 plus at any point, +680. 25 plus is +1400. Do you think that you'd be more interested in that, or are you more interested in a final outcome where they don't, where that's the end of the game, obviously?
350 to be up by 15 at any point in the game for Dallas?
Yeah. That seems a little light, given the fact that they could, or I'm saying I feel like that's a good price, given the fact that both of these teams can run hot and cold. Boston's only -125 for the same bet. To get by 15 at any point, which I think is Boston's obviously more likely, but I feel +350, you're getting a pretty good number on that. Cause what are the implied odds of that? It's about what, like 18? Is it like 18%?
I mean, if you get either team to go up by 25 or whatever it is, I would definitely play that. I think Dallas, like if you get Dallas up, if they're up by 15 at some point, like it seems overwhelmingly likely that they win the game once that
That they
happens
also
super
win.
early.
Yeah, I guess the problem is like I always feel like the like the alt spreads get like fucking weird. They get like real funky like late. But like I think like you're saying, like if you can get like a 7.5, like a -7.5, then it's not as crazy. Because like Dallas -4 is plus 360.
Okay.
So like that's, that almost seems better than for them to be up by 15 at any point, just because like you don't need that type of margin. But I don't know, there's so many different bets and so many different angles here that you can kind of tap into for the finals. Like they offer us so many more wagers, right? And I always think that that's interesting. One other player that I thought, like, I mentioned before, had a bad game, was Peyton Pritchard. Like, could not buy a bucket. He even got some decent run because it was, because the way the score was, he played 11 minutes. I did think it was interesting that he played fewer minutes than Hauser. Hauser played 13. He was 0 for 5 from the field, 0 for 4 from 3. Is there anything that you're looking at from a Pritchard perspective? He'd normally been great for them as like a number one guy off the bench or number two alongside Horford. What do you think about the fact that he only played 11 minutes in this spot?
So yeah, I think it's a tough spot, tough matchup for him to stay on the floor. Like he can't really defend. Obviously, either Luka or Kyrie. When you have two like very ball dominant guards, both of whom are a combination of too big and too quick for him, it's kind of a nightmare. Was he only at 11 minutes in that last
Only
game?
11 minutes. Yeah, it felt like he was out there longer, but it might have just been because he just kept like chucking
I see
shots.
15.5 for Pritchard.
Oh, so maybe whatever this is like pulling wrong. So, because I'm on cleaning the glass, so maybe that's a little bit off.
Might be non-garbage time that is.
That's got to be what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see 15.5 too.
Yeah.
It's definitely filtering out garbage time.
Yeah. I mean, I could see
he played
like
15 minutes in a blowout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we could see like 10, 11, and which is pretty much I guess what we would have saw. If this game stays competitive, it's a tough spot for him, and especially if he's not knocking down threes, which is going to vary a lot game to game. He couldn't have really shot the ball any worse in game one. The one angle I would his point props at 3.5 now, so it's we're down there.
Yeah, that's low. Yeah.
Yeah. So but I do think you can get his RA. I think it's still at -150, which is pretty much like my breaking point with that.
Yeah.
But if you can get him under 3.5 rebounds and assists at 150 or better, that is a play for me as well. I just think with the projected court time, I'm at 13 minutes, which could, I guess, argue is a little bit light. I think you could also argue that it's a little bit high if this game stays competitive throughout. And the problem with Boston is like they just don't, obviously it's helpful having Porzingis back, but they don't have much bench depth. Like it's Porzingis off the bench or Horford, whichever one is not starting, and then it's Hauser and Pritchard. That's it. Like they don't have anybody else that they trust. It's like Tillman, maybe Brissett, maybe in foul trouble or some sort of desperation, but just not many other guys. Like I think the one concern with Pritchard unders is the fact that like especially while they're going well, they may want to give Holiday and White a couple minutes here and there, and that could equate to 14, 15 minutes for Pritchard. And given who he is, he's kind of a firecracker of sorts. He can produce pretty quickly. So it's a little bit dangerous. I know we had talked about the game being on his unders in game one with our friend Prop Bomb, but yeah, it's just scary for me because I think he was more likely to play more in the early parts of the series than later after he's kind of getting exposed on the defensive end. So yeah, I think the Pritchard unders are worth a look, but I also think that there's still some very real risk just given the lack of bench depth in Boston.
Yeah, like I thought it was really interesting that they played Horford and Porzingis together, like at all, because like that's just not something that I was anticipating really. Like I'm sure they've done it throughout the course of the season, but I don't think that there's a ton of minutes with that like type of rotation. I think it's been pretty like uncommon for them to do that. But I think it also kind of is a testament to the fact that they're a little bit they're almost like uncomfortable, I think, going any further like into the bench. Like I don't think they want to go too much further down the bench. And I thought it was interesting too that, Drew Holiday and Derek White, Drew played 35 minutes, Derek White played 35 minutes as well. Those were two players that I thought um, do have potential to play more minutes in this type of series. Like they're neither of them are like particularly old guys. And I think that maybe had this game been a little bit more competitive, there's a direct like replacement for the direct replacement for them is Pritchard, obviously in the rotations. If Drew and Derek White are playing more minutes, then like that's directly detracting from Pritchard, I would imagine.
For sure, yeah. So that is kind of the other parts. Like those two guys, like White and Holiday, especially, like you kind of really need Holiday on the floor as much as possible to help defend this Kyrie Luka tandem. Obviously, Derek White very good in that regard as well. They just are so much better suited for this matchup. Like unless Pritchard is really just there to give them a breather. Like that's where he's the most useful. And I think the Celtics are hoping that they can limit those breathers to like a few minutes at most. And I think if they got into like 10 minutes, that'd be a point where, assuming they win the game, obviously Boston would be pretty happy with that outcome.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I think the fact that Horford's playing 30 as well, like just kind of shows that they're really just not trying to go too deep into their bench. So with that, is there anything else that you are looking forward? Like, is there anything that you want to see before we get out of here? Is there anything that you want to see in game two that might like, that you think that, maybe it's not actionable yet, but if you see it, like, maybe there's something that you either want to fire off on like live or you want to look for in game three. Like, is there something that you're looking to say, like, all right, like they made this adjustment that I thought was going to happen. Maybe it happened in like the fourth quarter of game two, but is there something that you're looking for moving forward that, might influence some of your betting?
I think we kind of alluded to this, or throughout the show, but they need to get more threes. That's obvious. I think anybody that watched that game or looked at the box score could tell you that. Nothing groundbreaking there, but there's a couple guys I think in particular that can afford to see a boost there, where Dallas would be good with it. Derek Jones Jr. only getting up 2 threes, especially after that Jalen Brunson hand kiss after the first one. I'm like, this guy's gonna be firing. Takes one attempt the whole rest of the game. A lot of that was Boston just not giving them that. So to Boston's credit there, but I do think Derek Jones Jr. threes ladder is for sure going to be something I'm on. His 1+ or just hit a 3 right now. I think it's like -150.
Yeah,
so I'll
2+ is +260 right now on DraftKings. You can parlay this with Mavericks -4 and Derek Jones 2+ threes is +1100. So
you're ahead of me already. That's exactly where I was going. I think like in terms of betting, I mean, I think I will bet the Jones stuff straight for what it's worth.
Yeah.
But I think like if you want to. This is a game for me where I'm excited as strictly a fan to play some very risky SGPs that I think have very long odds, and they should, but I think they have a decent shot at hitting here. I think what you just said is exactly it. Some combination of Mavericks alt spread. So, don't just take the money line, basically jack that up. I think like -5.5, -6.5 is good. I would like 2+ Derek Jones threes there. I think you could do, some combination of Luka and Kyrie production. Obviously, if they're winning the game, I think, at least one of those guys has to do something, pretty good. So yeah, I think like I'm gonna have some fun with this on throughout the weekend on Sunday as well. Just like building some crazy Mavericks SGPs. Obviously everything will heavily correlate, I think, but yeah, like taking some Dallas alt spread stuff. There's really nothing like I said, like watching that game that makes me like super confident. Like, yeah, this is what Dallas can do. This is like, it's clear. It's like, no, this is basically just like betting against a Boston team that shoots a lot of threes, just a lot of variance. Like, this is basically a bet on Boston's not going to shoot as well in game two, and Dallas will shoot the ball better.
You're going to shoot a little bit better. Yeah. And that, like, I wanted to get out of here, but now, like, I just thought of the other thing that I wanted to mention to you was with, like when we're talking about this, like jacking things up, like taking like these big alts, sometimes like I think that you can get a little bit more. I don't want to call it value, but like I think it's better like bankroll management in a way. Like if you think one thing, almost like instead of betting the baseline, like I don't think that there's enough value on me being like it's like all right, like I'm gonna be right here and it's gonna hit, like the baseline's gonna hit, but it's like you don't get paid out for being like really right. Like when you bet something that's like minus 110 or minus 130, minus 140, whatever. But like in an instance like this where you're saying like if I'm right, like I think I'm gonna be really right. Like do you find like sometimes it's better to just instead of betting like a unit or like to win a unit on something that's like minus 110, minus 150, whatever, to like jack it up basically and say I'd rather take this alt because like if I'm right, I think it's going to be right to like this degree, but like I don't know if the percent chance is worth it on like whatever the baseline is.
I mean, it depends a lot, like on the level of variance that I see within that thing. Like there are definitely like players that have wider range of outcomes, like guys who are like microwave scorers types guys, like that. You
Yeah.
can see like if this guy plays 20 minutes, like he could realistically score 2 points, he could realistically score 26. Like there's just guys that like, and teams also that have wider range of outcomes. Like you just it's not super consistent. And Boston, I think, is one of those teams, just given they live and die by the three. That is obviously a high variance shot. So, like with a team like that, that I think could blow somebody out by 20 or could get blown out by 20 in this matchup, like that's a team where I would be more willing to play the extremes than just like there's really no world where I'll be interested in like Mavericks spread in this game.
No,
Like
I don't really want
either,
this plus 7.5. Like,
yeah, no, I don't want that. I even like the the game money line. I don't think I'll play it. I'm very heavily positioned for Boston in this series. So I'm kind of just okay letting it play out. But I think the thing that I will do is in the event that the Dallas does get one of these games, which I think is going to happen. I'll basically try to set myself up for what you said, basically trying to be be overcompensated for being correct.
yeah, like leverage it properly, like manage your risk properly to really kind of maximize being right.
Right.
But all right, Steve, this was awesome. Tell everybody where to find you. Tell everybody where to find your work, and we'll get you out of here.
So scores and odds, Rotogrinders. You can find player projections. I contribute there. We got WNBA projections rolling now. Doing those 5 days a week. I do the NBA projections. My hands are not much in the MLB stuff yet, but I think they will be when we're done with the finals. Yeah, you can always find me on the Action Network app, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. So no, Steve is probably Steve is one of the most winning bettors on the Action Network app. It's just a constant. It's honestly like a little bit of a constant chase because he's a multi-sport athlete over here with his projections. So he really does do good work, and he's absolutely worth a follow. But guys, this episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at Props.cash. Props.cash is the best tool in the business for betting on player props. Just because you have it on your phone, you can get it on your phone. You can look at it in 2 seconds and tell you like what the minutes are. You can change the minutes restrictions. You can look playoffs, regular season, etc. for every sport, whether it's the NBA, NFL, MLB, college sports, WNBA, etc. You can get that for 25% off your first month with code Delera25. So, Steve, obviously, it was a pleasure having you on. We're going to send all the people this. We're going to get this into your ear holes literally as soon as we can, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So, thanks again for coming on, and let's continue to cash that.